G'day everyone. Got a few things I want to say about Islam. After listening to many discussions, conversations, debates, and even arguments on the subject, I feel that people are making a fundamental error when they use the terms moderate Muslim and extremist. And I hope that I can illustrate why that is. Before I get into that though, I want to start with defining a few terms so that we can make sure 100% that we're on the same page here. The first term I want to define is the word racist, since that gets thrown about, slung at almost anyone who is critical of Islam. So racist is defined as a person who shows or feels discrimination or prejudice against people of other races, or who believes that a particular race is superior to another. Cool. The next term is Islam, and that is defined as the religion of the Muslims, a monotheistic faith regarded as revealed through Muhammad as the prophet of Allah. Notice, that has nothing to do with race. Next is the word Muslim, which is defined as a follower of the religion of Islam. Still nothing to do with race. The next is Islamophobia. Dislike of or prejudice against Islam or Muslims, especially as a political force. Cool. I thought at this point it would probably be worthwhile also defining the term phobia. And a phobia is defined as an extreme or irrational fear of or aversion to something. So if you are somebody listening to this who is already feeling like I am being Islamophobic, now it's time for you to exercise your reasoning abilities and see if there's anything extreme or irrational about what I'm going to say. And the reason I think that's important, because a lot of the people that I have listened to discussing this subject have been neither extreme nor irrational when they have been critical of Islam. That being said, I'd now like to go on to giving a brief profile of the Prophet Muhammad. And this is important for reasons that I will point out in a minute after we've gone through this. So Muhammad was born in Mecca in 570 AD. In 576, he was orphaned upon the death of his mother. In 595, at 25 years of age, he marries a wealthy widow named Khadijah, who is 15 years his senior. In 610, he reports having his first revelations, and he was 40 years of age. Muhammad then became quite a problematic individual in Mecca, and he brought on the resentment of the local people by breaking with Meccan tradition and cursing the other religions in that region. Muhammad rejected the offer of peaceful coexistence. His new religion was intended to dominate others, not to be on equal standing with them. Relations with the Meccans turned particularly sour after an episode known as the Satanic Verses, which basically involved Muhammad eventually agreeing to acknowledge the other gods in that region. Then when his followers then began to lose faith in him and saw this as a sign of weakness. So he revoked his acknowledgement and said that it was Satan that had spoken through him, and this obviously made things infinitely worse. So in 619, his influential uncle, who was also protecting him, died, and Muhammad was exposed to the wrath of the Meccans, who he had been insulting free of personal consequence for approximately 13 years at this stage. Muhammad's search for political alliance led him to make a treaty of war against the Meccans with the people of Medina, another Arab town far to the north. This was the last straw for the Meccans, who finally decided to capture Muhammad and put him to death. In 622, Muhammad and his band of Muslim immigrants arrived in Medina, completely dependent on the hospitality of the 3 Jewish tribes that lived there. In 623, Muhammad began raiding merchant caravans, travelling to and from his former home of Mecca. He would steal property and kill anyone who defended it. So in 624 to 625, which was less than 2 years after arriving in Medina, 2 of the tribes that had welcomed him in, the Banu Kanuka and the Banu Nadir, were evicted, losing their land and their wealth to the Muslims as soon as their guests gained the power to conquer and confiscate. In 627, the last tribe remaining was the Banu Qurayza. Like the others, the Qurayza were a peaceful community of farmers and tradesmen who eventually surrendered to Muhammad without a fight. Some 800 surrendered men and boys from the Qurayza tribe were beheaded by the Prophet of Islam. Boys as young as 13 or 14 were executed as well, provided that they had reached puberty. The Muslims ordered the boys to drop their clothes, and those with pubic hair then had their throats cut. Muhammad parceled or distributed some of the widows and surviving children as slaves to his men for sexual servitude and labour. In 630, Muhammad returns to Mecca and conquers Mecca by surprise. Now, just a little bit about this man's personal life. Muhammad was married to 13 women, including 11 at one time. He also had a multitude of slave girls and concubines with whom he had sex, sometimes on the very days in which they watched their husbands and fathers die at the hands of his army. Muhammad encouraged men to marry young girls for sexual pleasure, lest there be any doubt by what he meant by young. Muhammad set the example by marrying Aisha when she was 6 and consummating the marriage when she was only 9 years old. And just in case you're wondering, the term pedophile is defined as a person who is sexually attracted to children. A few last points on Muhammad. This man owned slaves. He required women to cover their faces. He approved of prostitution. He recommended wife-beating. He hid his own wife. He killed prisoners of war. He was an advocate of suicide attacks. He killed apostates, which means people who tried to leave the religion. He beat children for not praying. He approved of sex with children. He enslaved women and children. He stoned adulterers to death. He would kill someone for insulting him. He kept women as sex slaves, captured and raped women, encouraged the rape of women in front of their husbands. And the reason that this is important is because, according to Allah himself, Muhammad is the most beautiful pattern of conduct and example for mankind to follow, as well as the exalted standard of character. And I found this interesting little anecdote. A quote from a former Muslim named Ali Sina. And he said, "Muhammad is a narcissist, a pedophile, a mass murderer, a terrorist, a misogynist, a leecher, a cult leader, a madman, a rapist, a torturer, an assassin, and a looter." And Ali Sina offered $50,000 to anyone who could prove this wrong based on Islamic texts. The reward apparently has gone unclaimed. So, now I want to get to this point about moderate Muslims and extremists, and why there is no such thing as either of them. If we are talking about Islam, then the Quran has to be the point of reference. And here's what the Quran says about the kinds of people that exist in the world. It basically identifies three types of people. And moderate Muslims or extremists, as far as I can tell, is nowhere to be found in that book. And what it does say is this: while it may be safe to say that a true Muslim, sorry, this is not directly quoted from the Quran, I'm using the Religion of Peace as my reference, and there's passages from the Quran, but this is just giving context around that. So it says, while it may be safe to say that a true Muslim would not intentionally kill another true Muslim, the Quran places no such value on the life of a Muslim who is not true. Consider verse 973. Strive hard against the disbelievers and the hypocrites, and be harsh against them. Their abode is hell. The Arabic for strive hard uses the same root as jihad, and the context in this surah is holy war. Thus, there are two distinct classes of people that a true Muslim is to target with harshness: disbelievers and hypocrites. A disbeliever obviously refers to a non-Muslim. So a hypocrite must be a Muslim of some sort. In fact, hypocrites are those who say they believe but do not act as they should. In other words, they are Muslims but not true Muslims. They will go to hell just as the unbelievers do. And so, according to the verse, their lives matter for naught. So, extremist is, when people use that term, it is synonymous with just Muslim. Muslims are supposed to follow the conduct and character of the Prophet Muhammad. Those who do not are hypocrites, which is synonymous with moderate Muslims, as far as I can tell. And the hypocrites or the moderate Muslims receive the same treatment as the infidels or the non-believers. And to prove my point, I'm going to reference, what do we got here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 incidences that happened in a 6-month period from January of this year back to August of last year. So on the 23rd of the 1st, 2018, Benghazi, Libya, we have 34 dead, 87 injured. 2 suicide car bombers strike a rival mosque, killing over 30 worshippers. 15th of the 1st, 2018, Baghdad, Iraq. 38 dead, 105 injured. 2 suicide bombers blow themselves up in a crowded market, killing about 40. 3rd of the 1st, 2018, Gambaroo, Nigeria. 14 dead, 1 injured. A Shahid suicide bomber detonates at a rival mosque, claiming at least 14 worshippers. 28th of the 12th, 2017, Kabul, Afghanistan. 41 dead, 84 injured. A holy warrior with a suicide vest clears out a rival mosque, taking out over 40 worshippers. 24th of the 11th, 2017, Egypt. Rauda in Egypt. 311 dead, 128 injured. A hardline group detonates a bomb at a Sufi mosque and then opens fire on fleeing worshippers, mowing down over 300, including 27 children. We have the 14th of the 10th, 2017, Mogadishu in Somalia. 587 dead, 316 injured. Religious radicals detonate 2 suicide truck bombs in commercial districts, devastating over 500 lives. 29th of the 9th, 2017, Kabul, Afghanistan. 5 dead, 29 injured. At least 5 innocents are massacred outside a Shiite mosque during a Sunni suicide bomber. 25th of the 8th, 2017, Kabul, Afghanistan again. 28 dead, 50 injured. At least 28 innocents are slaughtered during a Sunni suicide attack on a Shiite mosque during prayers. So, I fail to see how using the term moderate Muslim to justify Islam in some way, or to use it as a defense against it, is pointless, because they receive the same treatment as the unbelievers. Don't know what else to say about it. Seems pretty clear to me. A few other things I would like to say about the Quran before I wrap this up is a concept known as, one of them is a concept known as taqiyya. There are several forms of lying to non-believers that are permitted under certain circumstances, the best known being taqiyya. These circumstances are typically those that advance the cause of Islam, in some cases by gaining the trust of non-believers in order to draw out their vulnerability and defeat them. And if anybody is unsure about what the objective of Islam is, it is this. Muslims are told to fight unbelievers until they are either dead, converted to Islam, or in a permanent state of subjugation under Muslim domination, allowing people of other faiths to live and worship independently of Islamic rule is not an option. So lying, deceiving, cheating, committing fraud, all of these things are morally acceptable when it is done against a non-Muslim, either a hypocrite or an infidel. Another thing that's important to know about the Quran is the doctrine of abrogation, which was introduced because Allah issued later commands that abrogated earlier commands, or the original ones. In fact, abrogation is a very important principle to keep in mind when interpreting the Quran. Muhammad's message was far closer to peace and tolerance during his early years, when he didn't have an army and was trying to pattern his new religion after Christianity. This changed dramatically after he attained the power to conquer, which he eventually used with impunity to bring other tribes into the Muslim fold. So the peaceful passages don't really mean a whole lot if they come into direct conflict with later violent passages. They are superseded or abrogated by them. Another thing is called the jizya. Muhammad clearly established that people of other religions have to pay a poll tax to Muslims called the jizya as a reminder of their inferior status. This abrogates an earlier verse stating that there is no compulsion in religion, and it destroys any pretense that Islam is merely a religion and not a political system. So if you're a non-Muslim living under Sharia law, you will have to pay this tax. Now, in my mind, this creates massive implications for those advocates of multiculturalism and for feminists. And I don't hear this conversation being had by either of those two groups. And it should be. It has massive implications for Western culture and the Western way of life. So check it out. Do some research if this is coming to you as a surprise. Don't just take my word for it. Like I said, I was using thereligionofpeace.com as my resource, but I also highly recommend the YouTube channel of David Wood, and also Ralph Ellis's Unslaved podcast episodes. Both fantastic resources, lots of good information. I hope there's been some value gained from this. If you like the content, please feel free to subscribe, and I'll be back with another video shortly. Thanks.